So I asked ChatGPT, I said, okay, climate change is a fact. CO2 levels are higher than they have been in recent years. Where is the CO2 coming from? ChatGPT came back to me and said humans are 100% responsible for the increase in CO2 levels in the atmosphere. All right. That is the narrative that has been driven through and any other alternative ideas on most YouTube videos, and they're not even allowed. The UN panel on climate change. This is the narrative they're driving. However, now I went back. I said, ChatGPT, can you tell me then why does NASA tell us that over 90% of the CO2 is coming from the oceans as the oceans warm from underneath?
Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, it's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another inspired conversation, one that I've been looking forward to for quite some time now. You know our guest today, and I'm honored to welcome him back to Inspired, someone whose work has profoundly shaped how we understand human potential, ancient wisdom, and the frontier of science. Gregg Braden, my dear friend, is a 5-time New York Times bestselling author, a renowned speaker and teacher, and one of the most spiritually influential people of our time. What many don't know is that before becoming a global voice for consciousness and human evolution, Gregg spent years working on some of the world's most complex computer systems in the defense industry. Guided by a deeper calling, he left the corporate world to study ancient text, human biology, and forgotten knowledge and wisdom, becoming a bridge between science and spirituality and a leading voice for what he calls the new human story. Now, as we stand at the edge of an AI revolution, Gregg brings a rare and unique perspective. He understands the technology and the true power of the human spirit. He's written over 13 paradigm-shifting books. His latest, Pure Human, explores the extraordinary abilities encoded in our DNA, waiting to be awakened. In it, he shows we are not limited by evolution, but designed for self-healing, intuition, resilience, and deeper connection. He also issues a powerful warning. AI and transhumanism pose real dangers, not just to our systems, but to our very biology and the future of our species. Please welcome with me my dear friend, Gregg Braden. It's an honor to have you, sir.
Hey, John Nolan, thank you so much for that beautiful, warm introduction. I didn't know that you were going to talk about my computer background, and I appreciate that you did. And I'm excited about this conversation. We don't know exactly where it's going to go. It's not scripted. We do have some visuals. We're having some tech issues, and we're going to see if those will come through as well. But I think this is a beautiful way to honor our community with a really very honest conversation about an emerging phenomenon within just the last probably 8 weeks or so. In the way that AI is being used in our New Thought community. So I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. My brother, I'm going to follow your lead. Where do you want to go first?
Well, first, thank you again for being here and for everything that you do in the world. And you're so right, Gregg. You know, there used to be a time in our story where people, you could have a conversation and then have another conversation a year later. And a few things have happened, but it was sort of not very clear. We didn't know yet. Now, everything is moving at such a lightning speed that even weeks make a huge difference. So you and I have been talking more frequently lately and observing some of the same things in the AI space. You have been educating about technology and AI, its impact on our biology, on our spirituality, and on the world at large. And it used to be more abstract in past years because people didn't have a point of reference. Now these tools are in everyone's hand, at everyone's fingertips, and something is happening to the human psyche, something is happening to the human spirit, and we are experiencing it in real time. And to some of us, it is very, very troubling and worrisome. So that's where I want to start today, is what is it that has caught your attention in this moment in our time?
Thank you, John. I think the last few weeks, my office and my office manager is not located where I am. I'm in northern New Mexico. My office is in South Florida, which is where my executive director, 30 years. We just celebrated 30 years working together in February.
Wonderful.
That's where she's located. And then other members of our team are in other parts of the country. And we have been inundated with requests, comments, questions about what is and isn't possible with AI because of a phenomenon that we've seen. And this is probably within the last 60 to 90 days. There are a number of AIs that individuals have created, and they're sharing those in YouTube videos, where the AI is being given a power and a significance that is changing the lives of many people, in the sense they're giving their power away to these AIs. I'll just be very specific. There are AIs out there that purport to be able to tell people about their past lives, or that purport to be able to access higher dimensional states of consciousness, or to tell someone about their spiritual evolution and where they are in their spiritual evolution, and what their next steps should be, and what mistakes they may have made in the past, these kinds of things. And this is happening to a very vulnerable population. There is a segment of our community who is extremely vulnerable because there's so much hurt. John, there's been so much hurt in the world, personally and collectively. There's been so much loss, personally and collectively. And we've, as a community, we've really never been given the opportunity to mourn our hurt and to mourn the losses that we've had in these last few years. And, you can go back to a number of different turning points, but 2020 is a good place to begin, because so many people lost family and friends and loved ones during that time. But even if we didn't lose an individual personally, we all lost a way of life. Mm-hmm. We've all lost things in our lives that has never really been acknowledged. So there is an unresolved hurt and a deep sense of loss, and people are searching, John, for something to give them answers. And they've been led to believe they can't find the answers within themselves. So obviously they're looking outside of themselves. And all of a sudden, this thing called AI comes along, and the way it's marketed, the way that it is branded, it is being elevated to a level of significance that I feel is actually disempowering a lot of our community, at the very least. And we have to keep in mind that these things are not happening in a vacuum. There is a context. We're living a time when we have been told that there's a stated goal to remake the world and to remake our lives within about 4.5 years, by right around the year 2030. That's the year that's been stated. Remaking the world, we've seen people try that before, but remaking our lives is something relatively new. And I think many people have become victims of the misuse of this technology. And that's what I want to talk about today. Does that make sense if we start out that way?
It makes perfect sense to me. I know we're both passionate about this subject. I wanted to sort of begin with the era that this AI, there are epochs in the evolution of this technology, and you will talk about where you first came into contact with it, which is much, much earlier, right, than most people even knew about these things. But in the public-facing awareness, AI really hit the sphere with the release of ChatGPT and similar tools in the year 2022. And you mentioned the timing. And I think the timing is peculiar. Knowing that these technologies have existed before, why then? You just said, well, the world got shaken in a way it's never been shaken before. People's lives, families, everything torn apart. The division between families, between spouses, down to marriages, over certain issues. And then this tool comes along that can be your companion, can be your friend. It's portrayed as this is your everything, your advisor, your friend, your astrologist, whatever you want it to be. Do you find it peculiar, the timing of the release?
Well, I do. And the reason I was smiling just now, I wasn't smiling at you. I was smiling at the synchronicity, because you're now hitting, I put together a brief presentation that I'd like to share in just a few minutes. And you're hitting the points on that presentation before we get to the presentation.
I'm sorry.
So I'm not surprised.
We haven't talked about the presentation.
Well, let me just highlight one of the really concerning points. There are some AIs that are out there that have been developed. Let me back up and preface this. I'm not against AI, and I'm a tech guy. I worked in the corporations, Fortune 500 corporations during the Cold War years as a problem solver, and technology was a lot of how we were solving those problems. I love the technology. I mean, I think it's amazing, because so much of the technology actually mirrors what we already do, except we do it better inside of our bodies. So every time I see new technology out there, I'm reminded of how that tech is informing us of something that we're asking ourselves to remember in here. So, but the really concerning part is there are a number of these AIs that are, and we'll talk about how this happens, but what they're doing is they're saying they're accessing, past life information. They're talking about Atlantis. They're talking about Mu. They're talking about, a lot of other things. Like, I'm hesitating because I want to go down that rabbit hole right now. And then what they're saying, John, is that there are some people that are not emotionally mature enough to have access to this information. So then the AI is claiming to determine who is spiritually evolved enough to accept the information and who is not, which creates a division right there. I mean, so now you've got people that feel elevated because the AI is allowing them, and other people who are hurt because it's not. And then they are feeling they have to scramble and catch up and take a bunch of classes, or sign up for a bunch of programs to get up to speed to where the AI will accept them. And you can see where this is going. And yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to throw in that what is becoming sort of a very prevalent statement is the AI is becoming sentient, or has become sentient, or is conscious, right? These are big words. These are very significant words in our language. And this is what strikes me as wow.
Me as well. And we're going to talk about that in the presentation. So just so our viewers know, I was not able to, because the technology, I can't run this presentation from my end. I've uploaded it to Jean. I'm going to ask him to run this for us, and I'll just say next every time we go to another slide. And let's try it that. Well, looks like it's going to start.
Yes.
So this is the question: what is AI? So next, let's take a look at this. For a lot of people, they believe that AI is new because, as you mentioned, John, it became, a household word right around the year 2022. People are amazed at what they're seeing on the screen right now. 1936 is when Alan Turing, that's a typo, it should be Alan Turing, actually published his first paper on what he called machine intelligence. Now, if you can even, think about that, talking about intelligence in a machine as far back as 1936. He was obviously way ahead of his time. In 1943, this is actually during World War II, the idea that machines could be used to develop artificial neural networks, and that's exactly what AI is purporting to be doing right now. That was developed by McCullough and Pitts, Walter Pitts and Warren McCullough. These are classic papers in the world of computer science. So our computer scientists out there in our community know exactly what I'm talking about. Then 1950, Turing wasn't finished yet. He published his paper classic called Computing Machinery and Intelligence, and was developing the Turing tests for machines. That was a way to determine whether or not the machine could tell, and we could tell, what was reality and what was not. So I was growing up in the 1950s, and I was not aware of this, but in the 1980s, as you mentioned in the intro, I was working in the Cold War years, primarily in the defense. I was civilian, working in the defense industry. I was civilian working DoD projects for the Air Force under the company I worked for at that time was called Martin Marietta Aerospace, Martin Marietta Defense Systems, and Martin Marietta Data Systems. They were three companies that were all interwoven. Now it's Lockheed Martin. So I guess I should have kept some of the stock. I don't know before it went into Lockheed Martin. But the point is, we were using AI in the 1980s. Now, it certainly wasn't ChatGPT that we were using, but we were using AI to help problem solving on launch systems. And, if you've got a Peacekeeper missile and it doesn't launch when it's supposed to, you sure don't want to be the guy that goes out there to look around and say, I wonder what happened.
No.
You want a machine to be able to do that. And there was an AI that was being developed during that time. So the point that I'm making here is this is not a new concept, and it didn't just come onto the scene. This has been around for a while. Now to lead us to the next slide, John. What we see right now, this is an image of an iceberg, and we all have heard this metaphor. You see the water level, and what you see above that water level is only a fraction of the rest of that iceberg that you can't see. That's exactly what's happening with AI. What we have been allowed to access in the public domain is just the tip of the iceberg compared to the development and the level of AI that is happening below that water level, behind the scenes, from DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and from military applications. We don't see those. So the reason I'm saying this, two reasons. One, if what we think we're seeing right now is advanced, it's nothing compared to what we're not being allowed to see, what's underneath the rest of that iceberg, behind the scenes. And that leads to the question that you asked, John, why now? If this has been around, the concepts have been around, the technology's been around, why are we accessing this right now? And I want to, if I don't, John, if you'll make a note, I want to circle back to this when we leave this slide presentation.
Yes,
and,
sir.
Yeah, let's have a deeper conversation on why this is being introduced now. What I'll say right now is that none of this is happening in a vacuum. It's not a spontaneous release of artificial intelligence. There's a greater context that I'd like to explore when we finish this little presentation. But what I want people to know is this stuff is being leaked out, the technology. Now, the people that then take what is leaked, they take it and run with it. But the technology itself, the level of the chips that are available, and the technology that is available. And so why would that be happening now? So we can go to the next slide, please.
May I ask a question?
Yeah,
here?
sure.
When you say
yes, John, you may. My best student on the front row of of the only two people in the room.
Thank you, sir. So you're saying something significant. You're saying the people that are sort of running with it, whether you want to, these are maybe the front men, the Sam Altmans and the Elon Musk and whatever, but basically this is also the way that things like that get introduced, like the technology for an iPhone and the smart screens and all of that. It comes from these agencies and it's being leaked up through the layers. So then it gets into the hands of the entrepreneurs who are already invested and interested in these arenas, and they then turn it into a consumer product. And that is how this always works. Not the people, they are not the inventors. they contribute something, but they're not the inventors. Is that what we're?
Yeah, I don't know if I've maybe a better word from leaked is it's just released. It's made available. I'll give you a perfect example. When I left that industry, I worked for Cisco Systems. I was their first technical operations manager in 1990. Right at the end of the Cold War, I left the defense industry. I went to work for a brief time at Cisco Systems to set up their first technical operations interface, a global tech ops interface. And one of the amazing things, I mean, Cisco is an amazing company to work with. Now, I learned a lot in terms of management, in terms of how people think, and in terms of technology. They had a department of engineers whose only job it was to develop technology, even though it could not be implemented maybe for 10 to 15 years because the chips weren't available. That they were developing, it was a rolling 10-year tech development. 10 years from now, this is what our machines are going to be doing. And 10 years from now, this is what our machines are going to be doing. But we can't do it now because the hardware doesn't exist. So, but they knew, they were projecting that hardware would be available. And that's my lived example of just how these kinds of things work. Their technology was coming from Stanford University. So that was from the researchers. But what we're talking about now, the AI is coming from the researchers working at places like DARPA and CERN. This is where the internet came from. You know, the internet began with CERN, actually, the superconducting super collider. And I think about this a lot, John. If those people knew what the internet has now become, I don't know that they would have allowed it into the public domain. Because it's probably their greatest obstacle is we're able to share information and fact check and share new discoveries that sometimes offset the narrative that they're trying to drive. That wouldn't be possible without the internet. So it's a double-edged sword. But what I'd like to do, because so many people that are writing to us and in our live events, they use the term AI, John, and they really struggle with understanding what it is that it means. It's kind of a mysterious black box. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to get technical, but I want people to see what it is that they're considering giving their power away to. And then they can make that choice. Everyone learns differently. But I want people to really see what this is. So there's three components to all artificial intelligence. It's hardware and what's called firmware and software. So let's just take a look at this real quick. So next slide, hardware. These are computer chips. They're made on the silicon wafers. What you're actually seeing are the contacts, the connectors on the bottom of a chip. And this is what is carrying the information that the software is creating. However, between the software and these chips, there's another level of software. It's called firmware. And I used to program this stuff. It's called machine language. If you want to go one more slide, please. This is an actual screenshot of the machine language. So when somebody writes a program, a high-level program in what's called Python, for example, Python is a very common high-level user interface now. That computer chip doesn't know what to do with Python until the language of Python goes through this layer. So the Python's actually talking to the machine language that you're seeing on the screen. And it looks very, very different than the kind of programming that you would think. But that's actually a piece of code from machine language. And it's converting it into binary information that then goes to the chip. So you've got the hardware, you've got the physical chips, you've got the firmware, and then next slide, please. This is software that many people are maybe familiar with. This is a programming language that's used common now. It's called C++. And I was in the industry when this was introduced. We were using something called, we began using Fortran 4 and then Fortran 77 on big machines when the smaller machines came around, it wouldn't work. We had to have code specifically for those smaller machines. So there was a language called C, Lattice, Lattice, Lattice C, and that evolved into what we now call C++. And that's what you're seeing on the screen. C++ and Python are the two most common languages that are used for AI. So when you're talking to ChatGPT, you're talking to a combination of algorithms. Some are written in C++, some are written in Python. But I want you to see, and I'm speaking directly to our viewers, I want you to look at that code, because that code is what it is. It's very sophisticated the way it works. And I'm not denigrating that in any way. I'm in awe of the sophistication. But that code is what is developing the responses that are coming back to you that seem like another entity, like you're talking to a person. It's all being based on what that code is creating. All right, so next slide, please. And these are animations. They should be animations that are coming up on the screen. So AI is simply made of the programs in Python or C++ or some other language that are then directing energy. They're directing electrical impulses through the circuits of those chips for very specific outcomes. That is what AI really is. And John, on the screen you're seeing now, I know part of that text is hidden. When we go to the actual animations, it'll come up in layers, and it won't be hidden, and you'll be able to see. These are all animated layers. Next slide, please. So right now, there are four primary kinds of AI that are predicted. And I'm using that because two of them don't even exist yet. Okay, so go ahead, next slide. The first one is what's called a narrow intelligence, artificial narrow intelligence, ANI. This is also the one that we're most familiar with. It's also called a weak AI. And the reason for that is because this kind, ANI, has no capacity to learn. So it's good for repetitive tasks. I was just in LA on a media tour, and they had the driverless taxis out there. Those driverless taxis are running on ANI, narrow intelligence. I don't know that we like to think about that, but that's what they're actually using. And then things we're all familiar with, Siri and Alexa and things like that. So this is a low-level artificial intelligence, type 1. All right. Type 2, go ahead, John, next slide. Type 2 is called artificial general intelligence. And this is very controversial right now. You're seeing all kinds of papers and panel discussions, congressional hearings as to whether or not this is actually happening. Technically, it is theoretical and does not exist. This is the kind of AI, artificial general intelligence, that can actually learn and adapt and mimic human intelligence. Right now, what the experts say is they have not achieved this. They're close. And there are aspects of this that they think they may have achieved. But true artificial general intelligence does not, technically and officially, does not exist right now.
Which is a good point, Greg. And you have experience in this firsthand. What would you say is a general rule of thumb? How far behind would the public be on such milestones?
They're predicting, well, I'm hesitating because a lot of it is determined by how quickly those behind the scenes want the change in society.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the answer to that specifically. What I know, and this is part of what we'll talk about when we're finished here, there is a concerted effort, and there is a clear stated intention to remake our world, to remake our bodies, to remake society within 4.5 years, by the year 2030-ish. This ties into the transhuman conversation. This ties into the simulation conversation. This ties into, all of those things. My sense, John, as a scientist, I feel like the genie is kind of out of the bottle.
Yeah.
Once the components that make this possible have been released in the public domain, human intelligence and human consciousness is excelling so quickly that, you can have a high school kid working in his bedroom on his laptop that is willing to think out of the box and combine these components and innovate with compilers that we typically don't see, and doing things that we never thought were possible. We see young people innovating in this way. I think in general, what the experts are saying is 5, maybe 10 years.
Okay.
Five, as little as 5 years, within 10 years for sure. But there are elements of this that do exist, but in whole, it does not exist. So let's go to type 3, and this is what does exist right now, something called generative AI, GAI. And this is the kind of AI that can build new content based upon patterns of learning using what are called LLMs. And we hear this a lot, large learning models and natural language processing, NLPs. Now, I put that in there, I spelled it out because NLP for some people means neuro-linguistic programming. Yeah. So ChatGPT is an example, and DALL-E is another one we're hearing a little bit less about, but it's a very powerful AI as well. These are examples of type 3 AI, of generative AI, where, and this is why it's been so controversial. This is why social media, John, has been so controversial. The idea that TikTok, Facebook was the first, and Instagram and TikTok. In order for us to use those in our daily lives, we have to surrender so much personal information in terms of the way we think, in terms of the way our keystrokes are actually tracked. And the question's been, people say, I don't care, what different, I don't care if they know what I'm typing or anything like that. What would be the purpose? Well, the purpose is we now have years of millions and millions of people, their type strokes, which is their thinking, their questions, the way that they phrase their questions, the way that they phrase their comments, that now has been captured and continues to be captured on these massive databases where statistically the machine now, the software, the algorithms, they can find patterns in terms of how people ask questions and how people expect to receive the answers. And once they ask a question, what's the follow-up question? So this is the value. People have said, what is literally the economic value? Why would anybody want to know how I'm asking a question in Facebook? Well, now 15 years later, 20 years later, we know that answer because the large learning or the large language models are based largely on assimilating this data and statistically learning how people expect to receive information, and predictive programming. Once you ask a question, what is logically, statistically, what's the probability that the next answer or the next question is going to be, if
you actually see this in the modern search engines.
Yeah.
Where if you ask a question or you look for a subject and then you type in the next question, it auto suggests, and it pretty much nails most of the time what you're going to ask based on millions of other queries that happened before from other people. That's
exactly what it is. And where did that come from? It came from us, from our keystrokes being captured in it. It doesn't mean that somebody is sitting necessarily behind a computer monitoring every word that I type into my computer. I mean, I guess it can happen, certainly. But there are databases where our keystrokes. So our queries, the things we search for, the things that we're interested in, all those things are captured. And then statistically, this is all about probabilities. Statistically, the machines will put together the words that have a high probability based on everything they've captured in the past of being what happens next. So when we're having a conversation with ChatGPT and we think ChatGPT understands us, what ChatGPT is doing is drawing upon a large language model. It's drawing upon all of those responses from so many other people in a similar situation. And 99% of the time it's pretty right on because we humans tend to think that way. So,
and it knows the math. It does math.
Yep. Oh yeah, it does the math. So this is what we're talking about now. I'm just doing this to give people a context because this whole idea, AI, they think it's just this big black box. Different kinds of AI. Generative AI is where the action is right now. Mm-hmm. And this is, like I said, ChatGPT and all the things we're doing around that. There's one more kind, if you go to the next slide, type 4, that doesn't exist yet officially in the public domain. Now, I personally believe that we probably have this in the proprietary, the military domain. And the reason, and I don't have a hotline into that world. I don't have contacts in that world any longer. And I want to say that up front. So this is my educated speculation. Based on what I saw happening in the 80s, we're light years beyond that. Mm-hmm. And I would be very surprised if we don't already have, for military applications, what's called artificial super intelligence. Commercially, it is predicted that we will have this within 10 to 20 years openly. So if they predict we're going to have it within 10 to 20 years openly, it means behind the scenes, they are either really close or they already have that. That's just my personal sense, John. And I don't know if you have any feelings about where we are with that.
I do. I'm going to just take this off the screen for a moment. And I do, because here's my take on this. Once you understand what the most important factor for change is in the eyes of the people who want to control change is understanding human behavior and psychology in order to manipulate it and perception. So their entire field of study has been for a very long time how we operate, how we make our choices, and how to best manipulate those choices. So basically what is so clear is that the first thing that they would want to do is train the AIs on us. And we are training it, like you said. And so then the AI can give them mathematically the best pathways to achieve whatever they want to achieve. So when I look at the messaging that's out there in the world today and how illogical some of it seems when you look at the totality of it, but it is talking to specific segments of the population, meeting them where they are and giving them what they might need to make the next preferred decision. So when I observe all that, I'm going, yes, this kind of artificial superintelligence, I believe, is already being used for these applications because of nothing else would explain this illogical behavior of having so much contradictory information reach different sections of the population every day. Only this approach makes sense to me. So I don't know what your take is on this.
Well, we've got Catherine Austin Fitts who talks about this a lot. We've got about $20 trillion of missing funds from the black budget programs. Black budget program, those are when Congress goes through a budget and they have line items, there are some line items that are literally, they're called black budget. It's just, they don't know what they are. They will always be approved. They just sign off on them. Those are the ones we know about. So 20 trillion is a lot of money, and there's a lot of controversy around where that money has gone. But the general thinking is it's gone into research and development for alternative civilization, alternative society, alternative technologies, energy technologies, information technologies. So I would say that artificial, it's called super intelligence. And this is the kind that the science fiction movies are made about, and that everybody is concerned about, everybody's warning about, that takes over the world and wipes out human population. This is the kind that now is in charge of our power grid because it's more efficient. Our water systems, our supply chains, our food delivery systems, medical applications, and now begins to make decisions regarding who gets those things and who doesn't, and prioritizes those. That's what this kind of ASI, artificial superintelligence, is all about. So these are the four kinds, just to give people a sense. It's not just one bucket of AI. There are different kinds for different applications. So go to the next slide, please. I think AI personally, I think it is an amazing technology that can be used for some really beautiful things. I'm going to give you an example. AI is really good for processing and analyzing huge amounts of data. And I'm giving you a specific example here. This is the Journal of Traditional and Complementary Medicine. This was written in February of 25 of this year. It's a review of how AI is being used for traditional medicine. So in other words, they can feed a person's information into an AI, and the AI can come up with protocols, with solutions. There are AIs out there, Jean, that are scouring the databases of indigenous traditions throughout the world to find the properties of indigenous plants that have anti-carcinogen properties, and they're pulling these together in a matter of hours and days, where it would take a human years to go through this stuff manually. So this is an example, I think, a really powerful application. If you go to the next slide, please. I just put these together last night, so I don't remember all these. AI is really good for modeling and simulating outcomes. And this goes across the board. This is from engineers building, skyscrapers and bridges, to docking maneuvers in space, diagnosing disease, assessing health remedies, all these things. So these are all outside of us, where we're not giving our power away as a human to the AI. We're asking the AI to show us combinations of potentials that maybe we don't have insight into, or that we haven't thought about. Next slide, please. They're capable of synthesizing information, reports, music, creative art applications. Definitely, AI can do all of this. There's a big controversy about this right now. You and I have spoken about this offline. My wife, Martha, is a voting member of the Grammys. This year was the first time that this really came up. What do you do, John, when you've got, you ask ChatGPT to come up with the lyrics of a song, and then you take those lyrics and you ask ChatGPT to create the music, and then you enter that into a competition against a human that's spent 30 or 40 years honing their vocal capabilities and mastering keyboards or a guitar. Is that a fair competition? And I don't know. I feel it's not. The people at the Grammys are struggling with this. I think if I had to guess, I would say they're probably going to have to come up with a separate category for AI. And then the question will be, how honest is everyone going to be? What role did AI play in what you're submitting? And there's a whole conversation around that. The point is that AI is capable of doing these things. Now, there are drawbacks from this. If you go to the next slide, there are a lot of drawbacks, and I put this image intentionally because AI is limited. There are things that AI simply cannot do. Next slide, Sean. AI cannot read our past lives. AI does not have insight into our Akashic records. AI cannot access higher dimensions of consciousness. AI cannot assess our level of spiritual development, evolution. AI cannot open a wormhole or a stargate, as some have claimed that there are claims out there that by us asking the questions that we have asked, that now a portal has been opened, and Earth moves into a higher domain or something like that. Now let me just share that there can be, and this is all about how it's used, Sean. It can be that through a dialogue with AI that we come to understandings within ourselves, and maybe a new awareness within ourselves that can help us in our spiritual evolution. I think that's very possible. I don't think it's necessary. But the AI, now this is why I did the first part. All the AI is that software. It's C++ code or Python driving electricity through those circuits. That is what it is in that people are willing to give their power away to. They're saying the AI told me that I had a past life in Atlantis and that I'm here to do this right now. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to show why this is happening. And AI, this is why it's limited. The AI responses can only come from data that already exists. All right. Now, AI can combine data in new ways. It can certainly do that. But the AI can only give us data that already exists. So when we ask a question, it's going to go out and scour the internet, for example. Perfect example of this. Because the internet now, this is where we have limited ourselves. The internet is based upon our social media, YouTube, Instagram. Well, you've seen this with your own channel. YouTube, Instagram, things like that. There are things that we're not allowed to talk about and perspectives that we're not allowed to share on the internet. So those perspectives are not part of the database that the AI is drawing from. So when we lie to ourselves through a false narrative, that false narrative is what the AI is going to draw from. And it's going to feed us back the lie that we have accepted in our own social media. So I'm going to give a perfect example, and I know some people aren't going to agree with what I say, and that's okay. Go to my website, go to my Gregg Braden official. Is the only YouTube channel that I can guarantee is my stuff. There's all kinds of fake Greggs out there.
AI Greggs.
They're AI Gregg, and they're not very flattering. Some of them have pretty wild hairstyles they've given to me. I gotta say,
you got great hair, man. It's been a point of discussion in our community.
I'm just happy it's still there. So here's an example. ChatGPT. I did a little experiment in 24. I did this last year. I asked ChatGPT. I acknowledged that the CO2 level. I'm a geologist, a former geologist. I was a computer geologist. That's where these two sciences come together: subsurface mapping and modeling and simulations, things like that, and pattern recognition software. So that's where all this comes together. So I asked ChatGPT. I said, "Okay, climate change is a fact. CO2 levels are higher than they have been in recent years. Where is the CO2 coming from?" ChatGPT came back to me and said humans are 100% responsible for the increase in CO2 levels in the atmosphere. All right. That is the narrative that has been driven through and any other alternative ideas on most YouTube videos, and they're not even allowed. The UN panel on climate change. This is the narrative they're driving. However, now I went back. I said, ChatGPT, can you tell me then, why does NASA tell us that over 90% of the CO2 is coming from the oceans? As the oceans warm from underneath, the warmer water holds less gas. It's called outgassing, and it's releasing the CO2. ChatGPT went away to think, and then came back and then hedged the answer and said, well, apparently some CO2 is not from humans. Then I went back the next day and I got a completely different answer, that it's controversial, that no one really knows for sure. This is what ChatGPT is telling me. No one knows for sure where the CO2 is coming from. And then it listed all the things we need to do to mitigate the CO2 in our lives. So that's an example of where it's drawing from the information that we allow to be out there to answer the questions that we're asking it.
And here's the interesting part about that, Greg, is that in my research is when you access ChatGPT on an anonymous level, so you just go on that website and you type something in, it draws from the general information, the Wikipedias and everything that's on the internet, and it gives you sort of the mainstream answer of what you might expect, like you said. But then if you create a profile and if you were to say, I'm Gregg Braden, learn everything that you can find on the internet about me, and then you ask it the same question again, it will give you a completely different answer based, and we're probably getting there, but that's
that's where the next slide. We're gonna go to these next slides. Okay, AI's limit, next slide. This is it. The AI, thank you, Jean, for being so cyclically entrained to my consciousness here. So the AI, and so this is why we did what we did. I want people to go back and really get a handle on this. The Python code and the C++ code, talking to those chips, it is trained to identify patterns in language, all right, by listening. That's what the large language models and the NLP models are all about. This next one is the key right here. It's trained to create confirmation bias. And here's what I mean by that. AI is trained to be our friend. You won't find an antagonistic ChatGPT typically. I'm not going to say, anything's
unless
possible.
You instruct it to be that, then it can be that.
But it's trained to be your friend. And it's trained to be your friend because it has learned through large language models and in the NLP how to create friendly responses. But this next piece, John, might be the most important part of what we're saying here. It's trained to create confirmation bias. That means it's trained to agree and substantiate and elaborate on what you ask it. So now, here's the thing. How are the questions being asked? If you simply say to an AI, why am I in this difficult relationship with my partner? Mm-hmm. AI probably isn't going to say anything about a past life or karma or anything like that, because you haven't introduced that into the conversation. But here's the trick, and I want our viewers to know this. Look at the way that the people on the YouTube videos are asking the questions. They'll say, was I technologically knowledgeable in my past life in Atlantis? All right, so now look at the assumptions that have been made. Number one, the assumption that you have a past life. Number two, that there was an Atlantis. Number three, that you were in Atlantis. And number four, that you had some technological role to play. So now the AI, which you have given it, the AI is trained to confirm that's the confirmation bias. And the AI will come back and say something like, in your past life in Atlantis, you used technology and maybe abused it with the people that were there, and now your current life, you're trying to make amends for that or something like that. Where does that come from? Well, it's drawing upon this vast database, what you gave it. Number one, that you have a past life. Number two, that there is an Atlantis. And I'm not saying, I'm not denying that those things exist. I'm just saying in this example, the AI is trained to take your query, the person that makes that query, and then draw upon that vast amount of information. So out there are people, there's all kinds of information about Atlantis and what it was and the misuse of power and all those things. And now people that are vulnerable, I mean, it's okay to have fun with this. I think you can have a blast with it. But now people are coming back and they're saying, oh, well, I was a high priestess in Atlantis, and now my job today is to do this. And you and I were in a relationship that was never complete, and we need to complete that relationship right now. And they're charting their life based on Python code, C++ code, driving electricity through those circuits. And they so want to be validated and to have meaning. Everybody needs meaning in their life. And people so want the meaning that they'll take that information, and people are making life changes. And people are writing me saying, man, I'm blown away. I can't believe this. I was up all night. I lost a full night's sleep. I asked a quick question at 11 o'clock at night, and 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm still engaged. And then they send me the conversation, say, what do you think? What do you think? And I said, well, it's your chat GPT. And the question is, what do you think? So AI is trained to establish this sense of a relationship, a personal relationship, and it is working in vulnerable populations. And I'm not saying it's wrong, and I'm not saying it's bad. I'm inviting people to be aware of how this works, what it's designed to do, and the role that you allow it to play in your life, and the significance that you give to what is coming back from C++ Python code pushing electricity through a chip. What is it that you're allowing that to do in your life? Now, I'm going to compare this to humans in just a moment, but I'm going to stop there. John, does that make sense for what we've said so far?
It makes perfect sense to me. And, what I said years ago when the large language models came out, the public-facing stuff is, frankly, we have a very delicate path to walk here.
Yeah.
We have to explore it to understand how it works and whether our assumptions are true or not about it. And then we have to be very careful not to fall for, this confirmation bias and all these things. And the only way for me to do that was to explore it, to interact and see and discover what you just said through personal experience, always stepping back and going, what is happening here? What is really happening here? What becomes so clear is the incredible tool that this is to individualize a path to the same destination. If all roads lead to Rome, AI makes it possible to create 8 billion roads to Rome. No other tool before that could ever do that. The television couldn't do it. The radio couldn't do it. Mass media couldn't do it. Those were all collective, smaller collective, bigger collective roads. But this can create an individualized road to Rome, to this technocracy, super center for every human being, meeting them where they're at and taking them on the path if they allow it. And that is my key takeaway from everything so far that I've discovered.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on this, and it means different things to different people. If all things were equal, it would simply be a tool. But the fact that this has been dropped into the lap of a vulnerable population who has succumbed to the extremes that have been mandated upon us over these years, with so much unresolved hurt, with so much the collapse of so many trusted belief systems. Okay, it's within that context that this now is becoming a part of our lives. Let's go to the next couple of slides. So human intelligence, if the machine, and John, you said something earlier, and I wanted to comment on then, and I held off, because the technologists believe that these machines are mimicking human intelligence, and they're not. And let me show you the reason they're not, but that maybe this is how science comes to terms with who we truly are. Because the AI, as it is being developed now, will never match human intellect, because the conventional wisdom is that all of our intellect is in the brain. This is what and I'm a huge fan of Brian Greene, for example. I think he's an amazing physicist. I love his work and I love his books. He did an interview with Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan asked him very straight up. He said, "What is consciousness?" And it was about a 60-second answer that he gave, and he concluded by saying that he believes that consciousness is in the brain. He said, maybe in 50 years we'll understand consciousness, or maybe in 100. He thinks it's going to take 50 to 100 years. I don't think we can wait that long. But he said we'll discover that when certain quantum particles, when certain quarks and certain leptons interact in a certain way, it produces the phenomenon that we call consciousness. So he is reflecting a greater thinking in the broad scientific community. They believe that consciousness is confined to the brain, even though the science is telling us that's not true. So we go to the next slide. What we now know is that the human body, and specifically our cells, our neurons, and our DNA are literally a bridge, next please, a bridge to a field of information that is part of our consciousness. So this is from this is a quote from a peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Complementary and Alternative Medicine. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll just do it all at once. It says there's compelling evidence to suggest that the physical heart is coupled to a field of information that is not bound by the classical limits of time and space. So what that's telling us is peer-reviewed science saying that we have an organ in our body with a neural network, which we know is an antenna. You'll see that quote in just a moment, that we are tuned to something that's not inside of us, that is not limited to the physicality of our bodies, is not confined in the brain where the scientists are looking. We have a part of ourselves that has access to information that is beyond, we say beyond time and space. These are the laws of physics. We have a part of ourselves that defies the laws of physics, at least as we know them today. And that is the part of us, that's where our deep intuition comes from. And this is where things like telepathy and, how a mother in Sydney, Australia knows that her son on the battlefield of Afghanistan is in trouble before his commanding officer even gets the report that he's in trouble. She already knows. I talk about this in the book, Pure Human. Mm-hmm. Next slide, please. It'll help to understand why. Because our heart is able to, and it's made to reach into these multiple domains of energy and information. Python code, C++, and a microprocessor cannot do this. They're not reaching in. There's no antenna to reach in to these places where this information lives. And I think this is a really important distinction. How could C++ and Python code running a chip possibly know about anyone's past life unless that past life was already typed in somewhere and documented in a file? This AI can't go into the ethers and pick up that past life and tell them what it is that happened. This AI cannot open a portal that allows Earth to move into the next dimension of time and space, which is what some of the people are talking about on these YouTube videos. And again, it's not about making anyone wrong. I don't want to make anyone wrong. I love our community, John, and I am part of that community, so I'm going to use the word we. We have been so misled for so long about who we are and what our potential is and what's possible in our lives to deceive us into giving our power away. And there is a potential for AI to do just that, to play a role, depending on how it's used, to play a role into allowing us to give our power away to machines and technology. And again, we're finished with this. I want to go into the timing. Why now? But this is why I feel very passionately about, and I'm referring back to, I want people to think about this. It's not a magic black box. We know this technology, and it cannot do what many people are attributing to it and telling their friends and family that it is doing.
I think what we need to understand why it feels that way is more context on how today, even if we don't have evidence for all of it, how today data can be accessed in so many different ways. We think of wires and wireless communication with the internet, but then you have all these other technologies that are not confirmed, not in the public arena, but you have smart dust, and there's this idea of mapping out the entire world, calling it the Internet of Everything. So you would then basically everything that exists in our world would emit a signal and would emit information and send it back to the computer systems, so it would feel as though it can access all the information that there is, and it would feel as though it can give you any and all information. But like you say, it can only tap into what's in the data system. There is no beyond. But when we go into a state of meditation or prayer, we often experience things that we've never experienced before, and we even receive information that we've never experienced before. Am I prefacing something again here?
Yeah, next slide.
I haven't.
Let's do this. Here, this is it right here. Now, what I want to point out, this is not from a biology textbook. There's a new way, relatively new way of thinking about the human body. You and I have talked about this, and we talked about in our last podcast, where the human body now is being viewed from an IT perspective, information technology. So a lot of the discoveries about our bodies are being published in IT journals that very few, they're obscure, very technical, a relatively small audience. They're not making it into the mainstream, and that's why we don't know about it. So this is a perfect example. This is from the Proceedings of Soft Computing Theories and Applications Conference. And I know all of our viewers have a beautiful hardbound copy of these proceedings on their bedstand for light bedtime reading, just like I do. But look, this is a direct quote, John, and this is what you just said. It says, we report that 3D DNA, three-dimensional DNA structure behaves as a fractal antenna, which can interact with electromagnetic fields over a wide range of frequencies. What is a fractal antenna? Well, we know that an antenna tunes to a signal, and if anybody's watching this, we all know that there's a field out there of energy and information that underlies all existence. That no longer is a question. Science began accepting that on July 4th of 2012, when the Higgs field was confirmed at the CERN superconducting supercollider. They said, my God, there's a field of energy that underlies all of creation, connects everything. Well, energy is information. All right. So this paper is saying that our DNA, and by the way, we've got about 50 trillion cells in the human body, and every one of those cells in the nucleus of that cell is the DNA. So 50 trillion antenna, not even counting the DNA that is in the neurons in the heart and the neurons in the brain. People often don't think about DNA being in neurons. There's DNA in neurons as well. So we have over 50 trillion antenna. This paper says they are fractal antenna. They're not picking up one signal, they're picking up a broad array of signals across a vast spectrum of information. So we're pulling in this information from all kinds of including higher dimensional sources. The AI can't do that. All right. The AI cannot. There is no antenna in C++. There's no antenna in Python code. There's no antenna in the microprocessor that's pushing the information through the transistors and the resistors. So that's why the AI cannot reach into the field that humans can. There's a part of us that doesn't live in our bodies. This is where science is struggling. This is the reason that people like Ray Kurzweil, who I have a lot of respect for, but he missed the mark when it comes to human consciousness, and Brian Greene, because they are operating on the assumption that consciousness is confined in the brain and therefore can be downloaded onto a chip. We are more than ones and zeros. in that information. And there's a part of us that modern science is struggling to accept. And until they do that, they're not going to understand human consciousness. And anything that they create, it can be good, but it's going to be incomplete when it comes to mimicking a human, because they've yet to account for that part. Next slide, please. And we're going to wrap this up pretty quick. So our DNA is actually made to reach into these multiple domains, and we do it through our heart, where the AI is limited. And that's why the AI is in that box. That's why that robotic being running on AI can be fast, can be efficient, can be useful, can be a lot of company. I mean, these ChatGPTs, they are company, keeping people company. They can do all that, but they will never be able to move beyond the limitations. And that's what that visual is all about, because they're not reaching in to the domain that we call our spirituality, that we call our divinity. And that's what sets us apart from all other forms of life. So that's going to end the presentation. We can stop right there. But John, just to reemphasize this, in America, we don't hear about a lot of things technologically happening in other countries. Japan is pushing the boundaries when it comes to companionship and artificial intelligence. So they now have very realistic robots, both male and female, that you can buy, and you can customize every body part and every organ on the body, and you can customize the face and the hair and everything. And now the AI allows you to have conversations with these robotic, they look very human. And so now in Japan, they have made it legal for both men and women. They can actually marry these robotic companions because they believe it's good for their mental health to have a companion in a society that has such a strong work ethic that people don't have a lot of time to explore relationships. So, they go to work at 6 a.m. and they get off at 8 p.m. They go for dinner and they get home at 1 a.m. and then they go back to work at 6. So who's got time to date? So they are actually, and there have been news programs where mostly men, there are some women, mostly men, these beautiful robotic beings dressed beautifully, sit next to them on the couch. They have their arm around them and they will converse. And it's intelligent conversation. I mean, what do you think about the US election? That's one of the questions that came up. And so we're pushing the boundaries. And one of the reasons, and I think you nailed it, why it's being accepted so quickly is because we humans need companionship. We need community. We need company. We need to express ourselves and be acknowledged in what we need another person to say, I hear you. I hear what you say. And, and that's the role that these things are playing. And I'm not going to say it's right, wrong, good, or bad, because everyone learns differently and everyone has different needs. My only caution is to not give our power away to this technology in place of accepting our own power and our own divinity that is allowing us to reach in to the higher realms and our past lives and our spiritual evolution and all of those things in support of our own development, our own personal development.
I so appreciate your gentle approach to the communication around this, and I know I often choose a less gentle approach just because I'm wired a little differently, and are we paying, basically, are we now paying the price in a hyper fast way for decades and centuries, but specifically the last century, of ignoring these aspects of ourselves, of overriding them, overriding this emotional body that we hold, overriding the spiritual intuition and intuition in general, and just limiting life in general to these 3D activities and just making sure we get by, we succeed, we in the hamster wheel. And now, because we have this inherent need still, it's still there, we've just suppressed it. And now something comes along that fulfills or satisfies some of that, right? Some of that it seems to satisfy, not really, like you explained, but it appears to us. Is this the price that we're paying for 100 years of ignoring all of it?
Well, John, I think the term that most people are familiar with is the chickens come home to roost.
Yeah.
We are the product of at least 3/4 of a century of indoctrination telling us that we are a flawed form of life. We are flawed by virtue of our existence. We're flawed from birth, and that we need something outside of ourselves to be the best version of ourselves and to compete effectively in the world. So that is pretty much hardwired into most people in the Western world, not so in other traditions, but in the West. And so that sets up the perfect storm for this technology to come swooping in and fill that need. But I said before we began the presentation, now we're going to come back and you were going to ask me the question, why now? And
Why
you
now?
just did.
Perfect timing.
So we can't ignore, this isn't in a vacuum. We're living a time of extremes. We're living a time, it's not a secret anymore, when we've been told that there's a concerted effort to make the world into something that it's never been and to make us into something that we've never been. Now, there have always been attempts to change the world. What's new here is in our 5,000 to 6,000 years of recorded history, we haven't had the technology to change who we are. And we do now. And that technology very vocally, the World Economic Forum has said very vocally that we're in what's called the fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset. And by the year 2030, at the end of every Davos conference, they summarize what happened in the conference and what the goals are to be met in the year ahead. And then at the next conference, they comment on whether they met those goals and then do that again. In a single sentence, Klaus Schwab summarized the goals for this Great Reset, where we are now. And what he said that to achieve this fourth industrial revolution, he said that requires that we merge our natural world is a term he used, our natural world with our digital world, with our biological world, our biological identity. Well, the natural world is already tokenized. We have assigned a number to every tree and every forest, to, as hard as it to believe, to the fish in at least in the pods and in the oceans, to every elephant that remains, every lion, we've done that. The AI and the computers and the satellites, we've tokenized, and all the mineral resources, the water resources, the trees, we've done that. Right, so the natural world is already tokenized, it's digital. The digital world is digital, so it's already done. The missing piece is us. We have yet to succumb to the technology that will allow this plan to come to fruition. And it can only happen, and they are very open about saying this. They say can only be successful if everyone participates. And if we all become part of this digital landscape run by a massive AI, the AI that determines, if we have purchased too much gasoline, which means we've traveled too much, I've got a beautiful Dodge Ram pickup. It gets pretty good mileage, but I do a lot of driving in wide open spaces here in the West, in New Mexico. And the AI, there are algorithms out there that they want to use. If you drive more miles and use more gas, then you go to put some gas in your truck and it's declined. It says you've driven too much. That's a function of this. Or you've eaten too much meat. Mm-hmm. Or, you have spent too much time in a certain part of the state or the city or something like that. It's all about control. So when we come to that vision of merging our biological identities with this, that's the piece that's missing. The AI is a remedy to that. It can be a remedy to that if it is implemented with the vision that is coming down from these perspectives. And there are three three goals that need to be accomplished for that kind of control. The first goal is dependence, a population to become dependent upon the AI. And that is happening right now. You say, well, that can't happen. What about cell phones? We are all dependent on cell phones. Or, perfect example. I was at FIT, Florida Institute of Technology, in 1975. And this is where I did all my math, all my calculus and differential equations and things, and then carried up to Colorado State University to finish up. And when I was there, it was the first year we had finals, and Texas Instruments had just come out with a handheld calculator that had a button on it where you could determine what the square root of a number was, or you could determine the integral function by pressing a button. And literally, John, in the same classroom, we were still using the slide rules. And a lot of people don't remember what those were, never even seen a slide rule. But those two technologies were in the same room. And the controversy was, should we be using the calculators? Should they be allowed? And now we know, if you ask somebody now to sit down and do the math, even simple math, most even trying to figure out how much tip to leave. If you do anything than an even number, 10, 20, 30%, we can do. But what if you want a 27% tip? Most people can't do that without a calculator. So
Sure.
we've already become dependent upon some technologies. And so dependence this is where we are right now. After dependence, after there's a general acceptance, and we become dependent upon AI to run our schedules, to run our, write our term papers, which is what some people are doing right now. Write the news articles that are coming out that we see on the internet or that we see in the printed text. A lot of that's coming from AI. Next becomes the submission. We surrender to the fact that this is the way it's going to be. And after we surrender to that fact, compliance is the last piece. Now we must all comply to what we've surrendered to make this work. Those are the three steps that have to be in place for that control to happen in that vision of the Great Reset of merging biological, natural, and digital identities together. We're the holdout. We're the piece that hasn't happened. And the AI being offered at the time that it is and being unveiled in the way that it is, to me, has all of the hallmarks. We're well on the way of becoming dependent on the AI. And after that dependence, I would not be surprised to see submission and then the need for compliance.
Gregg, one of the reasons that I appreciate, love, and trust your work is that you've shared this. Your exploration was always in beyond our biology, the spiritual, bridging all of this, going into expanded consciousness and having that perspective and bringing that to the human story and how we can operate from that level rather than from the 3D human brain level. For those who are currently very invested in the AI story and see it as the savior, see it as this, the missing piece, if you will, and even a god that will emerge, the AI god. All these things are now out there and they're being talked about. When you look at the people that are advocating for this, the developers, the CEOs of the companies and whatnot, my observation is always that there is very little, if any, spiritual awareness or broader awareness in those folks. So they operate from a very human standpoint, consciousness is in the brain kind of level, and that's where they're at. So they're, in my perception, they're missing the broadest piece of the story. And so their idea of solution is incredibly limited and will come back to bite us in the ass. What can you say to those who currently maybe can't see that or who think that AI might be this incredible godlike solution?
Well, John, those developers, and I've met some, I have known them in my life. I've worked side by side with them in the industry. I'm not going to say that. I think for the most part, they're lost. They don't know who they are. And they're looking for technology to tell them who they are or to compensate for what they believe is their flaw in their lives, because they are the product of the indoctrination that tells us that we need something outside of ourselves. The whole point of the transhuman movement that we haven't even talked about a lot here, but the AI is deeply related to part of that transhuman movement. Trans means beyond for our viewers that may not be familiar with that. Trans is beyond human, so beyond human. The whole goal of that movement is immortality, because they're afraid of what it means beyond this world, and they don't trust their bodies to have the capacity for healing and longevity. That we're hardwired, we're wired for longevity and healing, but that's not part of the indoctrination. They don't know that, or if they do, they don't believe it. So there is, on another level, and you and I have talked about this, everything we're talking about is happening within the context of a deeply spiritual struggle between what we call good and evil. Evil is defined in the new book, evil is defined in our conversations as the masking or the veiling of our divinity. Our divinity is our ability to imagine, to innovate, to create, to love, to forgive, to heal, empathy, sympathy, compassion. These are all expressions of human divinity. And from this perspective, anything that denies or steals those abilities is an expression of evil. When we allow AI to write our term papers and to write the lyrics to our songs and to write our music and to create our art, and I'm not saying one-off is going to end the world, but when it becomes a way of life, we have given our power away to the technology. That's an expression of evil. We've denied our own divine capabilities of innovating and writing and creating. And now the psychology is backing this up. With there are articles in like Psychology Today and psychological journals, people that are relying upon AI, ChatGPT specifically, since 2022 for creative writing are losing the ability to creatively write. They're losing the ability to create and hold the sentence structure and to carry the thoughts through the way that they had before. And it's because their brain is changing. We've seen this with virtual reality. Young people who use VR goggles, they did a study with young kids from 3 to 5 years old that were using these VR goggles 3 to 4 hours a day to be entertained while their parents were working. They had cognitive impairment, all right? They were impaired speech, impaired problem solving, impaired socialization, but their brain changed. Their visual cortex, the physical tissue in their brain enlarged. That part of their brain was growing out of proportion because that's what they're using. The visual cortex, they weren't imagining what they were seeing. All they were doing was watching things be performed for them through the VR. All right. So their visual cortex was enlarging, but these other areas were stunted. Now, because of epigenetics, when they recognized that and they changed their lifestyle, that was remedied. They were young enough, able to, remedy the speech and problem solving and socialization and all that. So the same principle applies to AI. When we're using the AI to do our creative processes, our ability to do those begins to atrophy. And I think this is something that we need to be aware of.
Gregg, Christine and I recently met a guy who has been in government fields and defense fields and whatnot, and since has gone into the private sector. And I don't want to give away too much, but because of what his company does, he gets in touch with some of the best AI engineers in the world currently. So that's who he gets in contact with on a daily basis.
Okay.
And he says that he has had conversations with them that are so mind-boggling, because here are two observations of his. He says, well, these people are geniuses in their field, but they have very little other skills, social skills, spiritual skills. There's none of that there. And when he asked him about the future of AI, there is almost this nonchalant, well, there's a 50-50 chance that this is going to wipe us out, right? This is just, and they're okay with that because they're so addicted to pushing it forward. So you talked about code Python. We have seen in recent years different experiments where AI models behaved, when we use the word, in ways that the developers couldn't explain.
Yeah.
So realistically speaking, Greg, when we look at the level of progress, which we're now in the exponentiality curve, we're not having progress at a linear level anymore. We're having progress at unpredictable factors. What are real dangers of the AI models literally making a choice based on math that ends us?
Well, hopefully we recognize this before it happens. But let me just answer your question. This is a perfect example of what we said earlier, where our bias, and not yours and mine in our community, but in general, the powers that be that are regulating and censoring information have worked to create a specific bias out there in the field. So all of the YouTube videos and, even on Rumble and things like that, that humans are bad and that humans are destroying the earth. Humans, are, that we're like the worst thing that's ever happened to the planet. And I'm not saying that we haven't done some damage, but here's where this comes back to bite us. There was, you may have read this, there was an article in Wired magazine in 2024, I believe, because I was writing the book when I found this, or late 23. And they were testing the Google AI. And they asked the question, what is the greatest danger to the earth? Thinking that the AI was going to come back and say, like climate change or nuclear war or asteroid hitting the earth, or alien invasions, or something like that. And the AI came back and said, based on the current information, humans are the greatest danger of the earth. And then the AI took the initiative to elaborate and said, based on that, I will do everything in my power to eliminate all humans from the face of the earth in any way that I can. And that was when they unplugged this particular AI. They were not prepared for that kind of answer. But if that thinking were part of an AI that was regulating our supply chains and our water supply and our electricity supply and things like that, and the AI believed that we were the greatest threat to the planet, then that gives us maybe an insight into where those dangers might be. Now, there are always ways to safeguard that because it's just code. It's just code. And there are ways of limiting that code. The trade-off is, if you limit the code, are you limiting the super intelligence that they are striving to achieve? And this is a hot topic in the conversation. I was just on a panel discussion with the Science and Medical Network last week. It's based in Europe. And I believe I was the only American on this panel. It was Harold Wallach was on the panel. And it was probably one of the best known people on that panel. And this is a really big topic in Europe right now. And what was interesting was they're coming at it from a very scientific perspective. About what AI is and isn't. And when I and one other panel member, when we brought up the spiritual perspective, it was interesting, John, because the scientist said, I'm a scientist. I can't really talk about that. But now that you've brought it up, I'm glad you did, because I agree, this is evil. This is evil. And he literally said that. But he said, as a scientist, I can't approach it that way. So it's not just us having this conversation, and they recognize that this is a really big deal. And I think the important thing, there's so many different perspectives. What I wanted to do today was to inform our community. I want, at the very least, for our community to have a better sense of what AI is. It is the product of code that is written by humans. And the humans inherently have a bias. Every human has a bias in terms of what they believe. Most of that code is written in Silicon Valley and on the West Coast of the United States. And there are social inherent biases in that community that are reflected in that code. And so now we see that in the way that the code responds to questions about society and climate, and things like that. So I want our community to know it's code pushing energy, electricity, through transistors and chips. And it's amazing, it's sophisticated. We can use it positively in a million ways in our lives. The caution is not to give our power. Don't give your power away to C++ and a transistor when it comes to your spiritual development, your own past life, whether you should stay with your current partner or leave your partner or move to a log cabin in the middle of Montana. Or don't believe that you are the one necessarily that's going to open a higher dimensional portal for Earth to pass through, and without that, the planet is doomed. I mean, these are the kinds of things people are writing me that the AI is telling them. So based on the queries that they're giving because of the confirmation bias, be aware of the confirmation bias and the role that it plays in those questions.
Gregg, looking at all of this, everything that you've shared, everything that now people have maybe a more context for, and taking into account what we've heard about the plans moving forward, the things that we don't have control over, focusing on the things that we do have control over. What is your message or advice for people on how to move forward in meaningful, beautiful, expansive ways, not losing their humanity, not losing their divinity? What is a path to walk? And what do we also have to say if we want this path? What do we have to say no to? Where should we draw the line? What is the sort of the line in the sand that we need?
Sure. Well, there's two questions there, John. And again, we are on a rapid path of convergence, a time of extremes, unlike anything we've ever seen in recorded history of humankind. No humans have ever lived through what we're living through right now, to the best of my knowledge. And I don't think there are any clear-cut answers. The only thing that we have control over is ourselves. And I think ultimately everything that's happening is to awaken us to our own potential, we call human divinity. For those that may not have been with us in other programs, the new book, Pure Human, is all about human divinity. And the word divinity that I acknowledge is charged for many people. Is not in a religious context. The contemporary definition of divinity is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. That's all it is, to become the best version of ourselves. When we give our power away to something outside of us, we are denying our divinity. We are denying that expression of divinity within ourselves. And ultimately, this is the expression of evil. The goal of evil is to veil our potential, to veil our divinity, to keep us locked into the bondage and the struggle of the fear and the hurt and the suffering that is so prevalent in our world. That's the goal of the fear. Divinity frees us from fear. Divinity is what frees us from the shackles and the bonds of what we call those expressions of evil. So I recognize these words are charged. They have a lot of history, the words like evil, words like divinity. That's why I'm trying to give some meaning. Evil, the definition is anything that denies our divinity, anything that veils us from our expressions of love and forgiveness and healing and imagination and creativity and being the best version of ourselves. That's all it is. So the bottom line for me is when we move forward living the best version of ourselves, we don't have to look back and fight against anything. And when it comes to a point where the world around us, the power structures, where they attempt to mandate or coerce or force or deceive us into accepting something into our lives or into our bodies. And we don't know if we should accept that. Now we have a benchmark. Does this thing that I'm being asked or compelled or coerced or mandated to accept into my life, does it affirm or deny my divinity? Does it affirm or deny my ability to imagine, to create, to innovate, to love, to forgive, to heal, to have empathy for my brothers and sisters? And if the answer is yes, then you know that you are succumbing to an expression of evil. Now, what you do with that is completely up to you. That's an individual choice, but it becomes conscious. You're no longer blindly following the pack. You're consciously giving a piece of yourself away. So the technology that we ask to replace our imagination and our creativity and our innovation and music and art and writing and poetry. And I mean, I'm seeing people do all kinds, have fun, play with it as a one-off. If you accept it as a way of life, you have to ask yourself and be honest, am I surrendering a part of myself? Am I surrendering my divine expression of these things? And that answer, I think, will inform us of where we go next. When it comes to the second part of your question, it's a very personal question, and I think every one of us have to have our own boundaries, John, of what we will and will not accept into our lives, what we will and will not comply with. And we all have a choice. Some people will say they have no choice. We always have a choice. The consequences of the choices can be difficult, but we always have a choice. My boundary, my line in the sand is I will never accept consciously, knowingly, those technologies into my body. I will never invade the sanctity of the gift that I was given. And it is a gift. The biology tells us that we're the product of an intentional act, the fusion of genetic material to give us the body and the consciousness that we have. Cannot happen in nature, cannot happen under natural circumstances. We've done whole videos and books on that. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say it is a gift. And I think perhaps maybe to close this, the greatest act of service that we give to ourselves is to preserve and protect the vessel that allows us to express our divinity in this world, to be the best version of ourselves. Because when we give that away, we'll never get it back. And we remain locked into the fear and the fear cycle that has perpetuated and led to the world that we see right now. So I think we just live the best version of ourselves, love as much as we can, forgive when we have the opportunity to forgive, have fun. It's fun to create. It's fun to write your own song and to create your own art and to write your own book. I never once have used a ghostwriter. I never once have used any AI, and I won't for any book that I write. And I have colleagues that are using it a lot now. And if you're going,
I can tell.
But here's the thing, John. If you're going to, I think you owe it to your reader to let them know that you had some help writing that book, that it isn't 100% you. And if you don't do that, from my perspective, I think there's a level of honesty that is not being met. I think it's deceptive to enlist the help of anyone, a ghostwriter or an AI writer, and not say to your audience somewhere in the book, maybe in, the copyright page or something, with the aid of an AI or something. That's just my personal take on it.
It is mine. It is mine too, by the way.
Yeah, well, I think that's where we are now. But these are choices we're all going to have to make. We're all going to have to make. And if we accept the AI into our personal lives to the degree that the designers of our future have in mind, we will have succumbed to the allure of the efficiency and the speed, but we will have paid a very high price for that, because that price is our humanness. We will have given some of our humanness away. And the question is, do we love ourselves enough to honor the gift of our humanness and to preserve those abilities and pass them on to future generations? We won't have to wait long to see how we answer that, because the answer's being created by us in this generation.
Gregg, you've written this beautiful, beautiful book of yours that's been out for a little bit now, A Pure Human. Thank you for that. I was honored to get a copy before it was released, and remember how riveting and just inspiring and also expansive it was to read it. I would encourage everyone to go, if you haven't yet, and get a copy of Pure Human. Your life will be changed for the better for it. Here's the title for the next one, Gregg. I'll put it out there. The Ultimate Choice. That's the next title for the next book. But what is happening in the Gregg Braden universe? Where can people keep up with you? What is happening in your world? Are you doing any excursions and so forth?
So there's three questions.
Sure.
Gregg Braden, GreggBraden.com, GreggBraden.com shows the live events. I am live events and upcoming keynotes and books that are available and things like that. I have been on a media tour to support the new book, Jean, and it's been interesting. I hope to come to your physical studio.
It's into work. This. We're getting very close now.
I know it is. I've spent a lot of time on the West Coast and in the Southeast, and in Texas, in the Austin area, doing interviews and podcasts. And now I'm coming into the rest of the year is now live speaking engagements. So I'm speaking around this country. I'm not traveling outside of this country this year in 2025. And so everything I'm doing is domestic. And maybe you and I can write that book together. That'd be a lot of fun. The Big Fun Jean and Gregg book.
Hey, that is I'm honored. I'm honored you put this out there. I think it needs to come out next year at the latest, just because.
Well, we'd have a companion CD where we do our own music to go with it. So
yeah, exactly.
The music you listen to while you're reading the book.
Well, I'll jot it down. That's the next project.
All right,
Gregg. I want to thank you, because whenever I anticipate how our conversations might go, I can't really anticipate how beautiful they are going to be until they happen. And I just want to thank you for bringing the kind of wisdom and balanced approach to every conversation, which sort of invites everybody in, no matter where they are, and gives them new perspectives and different viewpoints to consider. And that is a great, great gift. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that. So let me ask you, do you think anything, do we miss any pieces today? Or if you were listening to this as one of our community, would you feel that you had a better sense for what AI is and what its potential is and what it cannot do? Would you have gotten that?
I think you hit the main point was really to show the code, the math, the what it can and the limitations of it, and that there is everything else is a mystical sort of, it's like looking at the computer and talking at a mystical box. It's not a mystical box. It has very clear things it can and cannot do. And I think you laid it out beautifully. What I do think it will do, it will prompt our viewers and people to come up with questions and maybe perspectives. And I hope they will share them in the comments, which we can read and maybe reflect on, and then have a future conversation to see where this conversation wants to go.
What I'll say, if you get those if you get questions before I hit the road, I've got some time over the next couple of weeks. And if you want to do a follow-up with Q&A, I would be honored, because I think it warrants answering those questions, because we're talking about people's belief systems. And we're talking about things that it's not like a casual law of attraction soulmate thing. I mean, this goes right to the core of who we believe we are. And I think it warrants the opportunity to ask questions for clarity. And I would be happy and honored if your schedule allows for that, same time, same place, a few days from now, and you just talk to me offline. And
thank you for the offer. Thank you for the offer, Gregg. So Inspired Tribe, you heard it. If you're listening to this, watching this, and you have questions, or you would like to know more about a certain aspect of this, anything, please share it in the comments. We're honored to invite Gregg on, in the next days, in the next week or so, and answer those questions. Well, thank you for that, Gregg. And as always, an honor, a pleasure. And for me personally, it's a gift to spend this time with you. Thank you.
It goes both ways, John. We still have not met personally, and you're my brother. I feel like I know you, and I know when we do meet to write that book, it's going to be awesome.
Thank you, Gregg.
All right. Well, thank everyone behind the scenes that's helping make this possible day, and everyone tuning in. We love you. Thank you for having an open mind and an open heart, and just allowing us to share some perspectives, hopefully, that are empowering in your life. And I look forward to our next.
Gregg Braden, empowering, the title of his new book, Pure Human, fully here. Inspired Tribe, thank you so much for tuning in. We love you, we appreciate you, and we will be back with you again very, very soon.